Stop the boats. That is Rishi Sunak's big policy, indeed, as it was Boris Johnson's before. They've managed to pass their Rwanda legislation. If it all was to go to plan, Rwanda would, during the month of July into August, take 200 to 300 people. But then, if they're coming across the channel in 300, 400, 500s every day, I wonder how much of a disincentive that would be. I talked a moment ago with Ivan Sampson about the complexities legally and constitutionally of all of this. But of course, there is one country that faced a very similar problem and dealt with it highly effectively. And Alexander Downer, who's acted as an advisor to the UK government on this problem, and you've held very high office in Australia. You were there, you saw Tony Abbott, the Prime Minister at the time, and you tried all sorts of tactics, but in the end, you did genuinely stop the boats, didn't you?
Well, the way we stopped the boats was, first of all, by setting up offshore processing in Nauru, which, if you like, is the equivalent of the Rwanda solution. So nobody who arrived on a dangerous journey by boat, having paid a people smuggler, would ever be able to settle in Australia.
And that was made clear.
And that was made absolutely clear. We also had a policy of turn back the boats, although we hardly ever turned any of the boats back because you can only do so if it's safe, and it typically isn't safe. So it was really the offshore processing and stopping them coming to Australia that meant that the people smugglers couldn't get anybody to pay them.
Yeah, if you kill the business model...
That's right.
You kill the whole thing.
That's the expression that I often use. Destroy the business model and then you will solve the problem. So Rwanda should do that, but it has to be implemented. I mean, it's taken them a very long time to overcome all the legal hurdles.
2 years.
2 years. That's not a help. But secondly, they have to make sure they have overcome all of the legal hurdles. We work very hard on that in Australia.
You didn't have the problem that we have with this European Court of Human Rights based in Strasbourg, with the European Convention being written into UK law by our friend Mr Blair, and by judges and maybe the Supreme Court sometime this summer facing a battle between precedent, the legislation that's been passed. You didn't have those problems. You were much more sovereign, in a sense, perhaps, than we are. But here's the thing, and I know you've been trying to help the government deal with this and do this with the best will in the world. If all Rwanda will take are 200 or 300 in the first 2 months, and we're dealing here with mid-July, which is 10 to 12 weeks from now, which tends to be the warmest, most settled weather in the English Channel. If they're able to come at 400 and 500 a day, the thought of the odd one here or there being deported, it's not going to work on its own, is it?
It won't work if you're only going to take 1 or 2 a day, of course. The potential migrants have to know that if they pay 3,000, whatever it is, euros...
Or 5 even, yeah.
5, to a people smuggler, they will not arrive in the UK. They'll blow their money.
But this is my point, Alexander. My point is that if Rwanda was saying, we'll take whatever you've got, we'll take the whole of July.
Well, I think they... my experience of dealing with Rwanda is that it's not true they've said there's any upper limit. They will take whatever the...
Well, they've said 200 to 300 to begin with.
Well, not when I was there.
Well, okay.
Not when I was there.
Well, okay.
I have to say, but it doesn't matter, because the point here is the government needs to define a point beyond which anyone who tries to cross the channel in this way will end up in Rwanda. They need to define that temporal point.
So if Rwanda... so I go back to the point.
And so they won't get a lot of people.
If Rwanda can't take the volume, it isn't going to work, is it?
No, right. But I make the point that you won't get the volume if the potential migrants know that they're going to end up in Rwanda.
That'll depend a bit on percentages, won't it? I mean, if you come to Britain illegally now, you've got a 1 to 1.5% chance of being deported.
Yeah.
That's a very low risk.
Yeah.
If Rwanda is 5-10% of the volume that come this summer in the short term, it's not going to work, is it?
No, if your point is right, if it's not a comprehensive solution, then the potential migrants are going to think it's worth giving it a run. So it depends how comprehensive it is. I mean, I've always said to the British government, you don't want carve-outs. You don't want to say, well, you'll have carve-outs for women and children or particular types of asylum seekers. You can't do that. You have to have a comprehensive approach. Everybody who tries to cross the channel beyond a certain date will have their application processed in Rwanda.
Women, young, old.
Yeah, everyone. I mean, they're only being transferred to Rwanda. It's a bit of a flight. It's a flight that I've made. It's a lovely country. They'll be transferred there and they'll be processed in the normal way.
Is it safe? You've been there?
It's perfectly safe, yes. I mean, it's a beautiful country. I've often said to people, I must be about the only person in the UK who's been to Nauru and Rwanda.
You're probably quite a unique position.
Pretty much the only one. And if I had to choose between Nauru, where Australians do the offshore processing, and Rwanda, I would choose Rwanda. It's a beautiful country. Nauru is a small island in the middle of the Pacific.
Interesting.
But I might have another choice if I was one of these asylum seekers, because I keep reminding people they're coming from France. So they have a choice between France or Rwanda. I mean, if I had a choice between living in France or living in Rwanda, I don't know which way I'd go.
What's the appeal of the UK, do you think? You know, I mean, I know you're a close friend of this country, but you can be slightly more dispassionate, perhaps, than we can be. What is it about the UK? Why do they want to be
Well, they might
here?
have relatives here. They might think it's easier to get a job here. It's a less regulated labour market. And that it's a country that speaks English, and so English is the sort of lingua franca of the world.
And we're a soft touch.
Right. I mean, exactly. I mean, if you look at the percentage of refugee applications in the UK that are accepted, it's something, I mean, it's gone out of my head, but it's something like 75%.
It's ridiculous.
And in the EU, it's much lower. It's 40 to 50%.
Cynically, I think, Alexander, the reason that so many people get granted asylum is the way of clearing the backlog, is my own view on it.
There'll be a bit of that going on now.
You've worked very hard on this. You're obviously pleased the legislation's gone through.
I'm glad.
We'll have you back in 10 weeks' time to see how this is all working out. All right.
I look forward to explaining how well it's working in 10 weeks' time.
Well, we'll see. Well done for stopping the boats in Australia.